Hello, everyone. Welcome to Idle Insights, and I'm joined by the illustrious Mr. Jim Zub. How are you doing today? Yeah. uh, the Massive Dragon Slayer. You've got a lot going on, and it always seems like you always have a lot going on. But recently, we played in a game together. Yeah, seriously, and even then, amongst 15 other people. Uh, Well, we are having some sort of technical difficulty, so I am going to repair the situation. So, real quick, everyone, we're going to restart.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We're starting again. I am joined by Jim Zub. I apologize. He was muted. That is on me. We should be good for now. As I was saying, and you are not hearing, Jim Zub and I got to play in Idle Champions Presents 2, and that was an amazing experience for both of us.
It was. We finally got to play together. I know we've talked about it in the past, and but mind you, it was a pretty large group. Probably the largest D&D combat that I've done in a long time. I can't remember doing any kind of combat with 15 players before.
I did have something when I was 18, and I did that with a little bit more. We called it the Christmas episode because everyone was
Nice.
in town.
Yeah.
And other people had heard about it and never played, and so I had two assistant DMs.
Oh,
and myself.
That is very helpful.
So, like, in corners, combat was going on, and then they would just throw the numbers at me, and then that was taken care of. But it was
There's this martial arts RPG called Feng Shui.
Yeah.
And we would always do a pull together thing at Christmas called Seasons Beatings. And it was like a big battle royale of characters. And I think there was like 12 in there. And I thought, man, that is the most I'm ever going to play in one thing. So kudos to B-Dave and the rest of the crew at Idle Champions for pulling together that insane.
Yeah, I think that's initially the brainchild of Mr. Dylan Wilkes, and Dylan is like kind of the mastermind behind the scenes of a lot of this stuff, and he's such a wonderful human being to work with, and he's on Bardic Inspiration, and
nice. Yeah, he's great. We've talked multiple times. He's so good, and yeah, I can't even imagine though. B-Dave is a steely nerve dungeon master. I gotta tell you, that's a lot.
You gotta. I mean, like I'm tense watching. I'm glad I'm playing.
Yeah. I just got to deal with my own character, my own stats, right? And then you're trying to juggle all those different pieces. And everyone, all of us are very gregarious, and we all want our little spotlight moments. And you got to try and make it all weave together. It's not an easy task.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You and I are very gregarious. Yeah, certainly. Like, we only need 1 minute.
Oh yeah. You just make the most impact in that instant. I think that's that's your job, right? Like, your job is to, as the player on one of these stream games, you should be prepared, and you should be obviously energized, and then you're just trying to bring your best at every moment and play off of other people as well. It's not just like hugging the spotlight and going me. It's like, okay, what are we doing collectively, or how can I riff on something that you're already doing and keep that momentum going? That's your classic kind of improv element, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you were very good at yes anding. It was
thanks.
I want to kind of get into the fact, like, you are in this Minsc and Boo kind of weird situation. How did this all evolve? and it's so funny because I wouldn't have typically just been like, I remember when you shaved your head to
D&D Live 2019. Yeah.
And you murdered it.
Thanks, man. I gotta tell you, I've been involved with Minsc and Boo since 2014, right? So even we could talk about how the D&D comic came about, because it was really quite unusual. fifth edition hadn't launched yet. Fourth edition had wound down, and I was working on a bunch of other comic book stuff, including at the time I was writing Samurai Jack for IDW. So that was like a continuation of the Samurai Jack series before they did the fifth season of Samurai Jack. Ted Adams, who's the owner of IDW, he got in touch with me at Emerald City Comic Con. So it was like this time of year, I think in 2014, comes by my booth and he said, man, I really love what you're doing with Samurai Jack. Is there anything else you want to write, at IDW, like of the licenses we have and the books that we have are involved with? And I knew they had what's called like the Hasbro master license. So anything Hasbro related they could do. And they'd done previous Dungeons and Dragons comics. And I was like, I really want to do D&D. And he's like, really? And I go, yeah. And he goes, oh man, just between you and me, like, Wizards of the Coast is like really demanding, like they're very difficult and there's a lot involved. And I was like, that's okay. Like it's Dungeons and Dragons. I'm more than happy. And what he meant by that was just, they're very, D&D is not generic fantasy as much as people might think it is. It's not. And so you have to know the material. You have to know
There's
how the
a lot of
worlds
identity there.
The lore and the spells and how magic works and all that stuff. And I think in the past, Wizards has dealt with a lot of people who think Dungeons and Dragons is like, oh, save the princess, go slay the dragon stuff. Very generic kind of fantasy tropes and concepts. And we get on a call with them. And it was great because we're all speaking the same language. I've grown up playing this stuff. I've been playing D&D since I was 8 years old. So it was great. We had a wonderful kind of interactivity on the call. And we started talking about, the possibilities. And they explained to me Tyranny of Dragons and all the stuff that they were planning for the launch. And they asked me if I wanted to do an adaptation of The Big Adventure. And I said, honestly, no. Like, I don't want to come out of the gate with Lord of the Rings style, big epic fantasy up against Tiamat. What I love about D&D is like 5 people go in a hole, like, let's get into trouble, low level kind of stuff. And then we can build up to more epic adventure. Let's see who these characters are in a really small interactive group. So we can kind of, get the emotional quality going. And then future adventures with each one, we can sort of build up to more epic, payoff. And yet we still have a big dragon battle in our first, story arc and all that kind of stuff. And they actually recommended to me, well, we've seen the kind of stuff you've done. Oh,
my camera just disappeared.
You can hear my audio though.
Yeah. Why'd your camera disappear?
I have no idea. It says it's unable to detect my camera.
Oh,
that's
well,
very,
now
very
there's a very tight shot of my face.
Oh, sorry. That is very odd. Oh, technical difficulties. Let me see if I can get my camera.
Hold on, everybody.
Apologies.
I'm just gonna move over here.
I'm back.
There we go. Yay.
All right. Hopefully it doesn't do that again. That was very odd.
That's shocking.
I wasn't touching anything.
At least it didn't happen during the show.
It's true.
I mean, the other show.
Yeah, right? All right. Hopefully my camera will stay. Technology, we love you so much.
I mean, you brought up an interesting point, not only for narrative, but also for playing D&D. I find that I enjoy the low levels the most because you are figuring it out. You're figuring out who you are.
And the threats are really easy to stage because everything's a bit of a threat, right? Levels 1 to 6, you're like, oh man, this giant rat's going to take us down, or like whatever, but so that was what I kind of came back to them with. And then they recommended, they'd read the people at Wizards, I had sent them Skull Kickers and a couple other things I'd done. And Skull Kickers is this fantasy comic series that I did that's very tongue-in-cheek and kind of riffs on a lot of the tropes of fantasy and kind of bulldozes through them. And they were like, oh, we get it. You want a more kind of fun, like ridiculous. And I'm like, I don't want to make fun of D&D, but humor is a big part of what people love at the table. So I would definitely bring that into the mix. And then they said to me, there are these cult characters, Minsc and Boo, from the Baldur's Gate video games. They're very fun and playful. Does that interest you? And I was like, oh man, I mean, I remember the video game. Those characters are great. But I thought they were gone, like, because the original Baldur's Gate takes place like 100 years ago in the Forgotten Realms continuity. And they said, yeah, but it's a world of magic, you could figure it out. And I was like, I probably could. And so I did some research on that and found out that in the current, Forgotten Realms, there's a statue of Minsc and Boo in the wide, which is like the big open market. And so it's sort of like a little callback to their old adventures. And I remembered that I think it's in Baldur's Gate 2, one of the NPCs that you meet is actually a person that's been turned into a statue, and you rescue them, and they are much older than they appear. And I was like, wouldn't it be fun to do a riff on that? But we do it with Minsc and Boo, that they were statues for over 100 years. Wizards really loved it. They said, yeah, that's great, let's do it. And so we basically made that the new canon, that Minsc and Boo, were back in current Forgotten Realms. And I wrote that in the first miniseries, Legends of Baldur's Gate. And I did a lot of research. You listen to those audio clips of Jim Cummings doing the voice of Minsc. He's very funny. He's got a very particular accent and kind of patter. And I didn't want to just reuse all those lines from the video game, because it like, I didn't want it to feel like Minsc and Boo were like, Minsc was a guy with a pull string, one of those dolls where he's only got 5 lines and you just say them over and over and over again. So I was like, okay, what is a Minsc sounding bit of dialogue? Like, he has a very purity of purpose. He's 100% convinced of his own heroism, but he looks at things and he will focus on a very particular part or detail, and he'll build his whole narrative around other people around them, a nickname that he gives them, or a particular thing that he'll do in the adventure. And so, in our case for the Idle Champions thing, it was like, okay, so we have to, the first thing that B. Dave said was our mission was to purify the forest. So in Minsc's mind, well, what is purity? Purity is goodness, and goodness is happiness, and happiness is feeling good. And how do you feel good? Well, if someone gives you a hug or kiss. So he's like, okay, so we got to kiss the trees. So it's like this weird thread of logic that makes sense to Minsc. And then he just hunkers down and he goes, oh, kiss the trees. And so he's like going over and hugging trees, and people are like, this guy's nuts. And it's like, yes, but in his mind, this is very simple, right? Oh, that guy's bad, go kick their butt. Oh, you're evil, we got to cut your head off. Like, he's very, focused in his purpose. And in turn, it gives him an insane amount of courage, because he has no doubts most of the time, right? And what it also means is that when you inject doubt into his story, it takes on a lot of pathos. So I've done it in the comic series a couple times, and we did it in episode 6 of the Idle Champions thing, where Minsc can't get out of the fact that he is not able to save someone. And in turn, the guilt just overwhelms him. It's something really intense. And so he is a jokey character and a funny character. But then if you're able to summon up some of that pathos, you actually get a little bit more depth to him. That it's like, no, this guy's entire identity has been built around his own heroism. And if you take that away, he doesn't know who he's supposed to be. You know what I mean? And so it's like, in that way, you can get all the surface level kind of kookiness into it. And I play that up, obviously, in the comics and in the live streams. But then when you do hit that dramatic note, people are taken aback, and I think a way that's pretty effective. And it's been a really fun thing to kind of be able to do, and to build up my knowledge and kind of my take on the character, and have people respond to it really well, to the point that when I was in the office at Wizards, this must have been 2018, maybe even late 2017, Adam Lee invited me in to do the consulting on what would eventually be Descent into Avernus, because it had the Baldur's Gate angle and everything else. And when he took me around the office and introduced me to everyone, he said, oh, this is Jim Zub. He's the keeper of Minsc and Boo. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I mean, I guess so. Like, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but what a cool thing to kind of have, under my wing. And then when they were putting together D&D Live, and Perkins reached out to me and said, hey, we'd love to have you play in one of the live games. Are you up for playing Minsc? And I was like, I mean, I'm not Jim Cummings, but like, yeah, I could try. I can do my best to try and exemplify those qualities and everything else. And the one thing I was most worried about was being on stage with like all those people, well-known streamers, really well-known faces. How am I going to keep up with them? How am I going to do a good job, along with everyone else? And I was like, well, I kind of got to go for the gusto. So the joke, I think Greg Tito, who's the PR guy over at Wizards, he made a joke about, well, I'm going to have to shave my head. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. He goes, no, I was just kidding. And I was like, no, man, let's just do it. Like, this is, when am I ever going to get a shave?
Right.
If you hire a professional like makeup artist to do up the tattoo and all the stuff, I'll shave my head. And he was like, done, I'll book it right now. And Mercer was like, are you sure? Because, I was like, yep. Although you have to have the little hamster whiskers. That was my only request for Matt Mercer. I'm like, look, man, if I'm shaving my head and getting purple over half of it, you gotta get hamster whiskers. And he was like, done. I was like, all right, we're in. So that was one of the craziest experiences of my entire life. That whole weekend was such a surreal ride. And it was my birthday on the stream game. Like, it was that day as well. So that just made it even more bonkers, and so much fun too, right? Like, just next level. Yeah.
How much do you, because you talk about like in knowing that voice of that character, when you play D&D, is that something that you kind of, I find that I have to really work it out ahead of time. Like, how does this person think? And certainly I think a lot of people figure that out as they play.
Sure.
I'm someone who has to know. I have to know exactly why they act the way they do.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Minsc is, he's the original Leroy Jenkins. He predates that concept by decades, right? And so he is the charge in and die vaingloriously kind of hero. And the universe seems to tilt in his favor whether or not he deserves it, And the fact that I've been so lucky in terms of dice rolling while I played him on live streams just bolsters his. And I don't fake that stuff. Like when we're going a little deep cut, but like during that live stream game at D&D Live, Perkins gave Minsc double disadvantage on a roll because we were in a hell. And I ended up beating it, rolling 3 dice and still rolling high enough to beat this skill check. That the whole crowd went nuts. And then he did it again, like 2 minutes later, to finish climbing up this impossibly tall cliff or whatever, and the crowd went nuts, and I kind of was taken aback that I managed to pull it off. And then doing this insane thing during the idle game where I have this Vorpal greatsword and I cut the heads off 2 dragons and then cut one of the heads off Tiamat, and you're just like, you can't plan this stuff, you can't write this stuff. If I wrote that in the story, people would be like, yawn, sure, he cuts the head off 2 dragons. But when you roll it and it happens in the moment, man, there's nothing quite like it, It is
a very unique experience like that. I mean, those critical wins of just preposterousness. Megan has become kind of the queen of them as well, where she just, I remember we were playing in a 101 shot with B. Dave Walters, and I was playing Avery, she was playing Whittle, who you are now very aware of. And we were in this part of the negative material plane where Acererak had a fortress, and it was meant to turn him into a god, and it had all this ectoplasm and all this stuff. So I sat in it. I'm like, don't introduce a chair to that character. And Whittle and Megan rolled a natural 20 to get it to work.
Right.
And that's kind of like B-Dave, and my personal rule is like, if you got a 20, you succeed.
Right.
Like that's
and on the
fun.
Stream games in particular, like, just go with it because it's such a fun moment, right? And the nice thing is, because I was doing this in D&D Beyond and I rolled the dice digitally,
you can prove it.
There's a log. Like, I'm not making this stuff up, because the natural thing is, oh sure, you rolled your math rocks and you got your 20s. It's like, no man, check the feed, it really happened. And I kind of enjoy that aspect of it, weirdly. Like, I'm not the kind of person that's going to police people on their dice, but there is something really enjoyable about being able to say, check the tapes, like, it's for real.
100%. Like, I will roll some dice and take a photo of those dice.
Yeah.
And send them like, this actually happened. I got to do this with Lauren, where she was rolling to basically resurrect herself using divine intervention. It's a very complex storyline, but she was a simulacrum that found her own dead body. She had no idea that she was a simulacrum. And she made me roll the divine intervention roll. And it was basically save or die. And she got under. I mean, I rolled under.
Sure.
And like, everyone's freaking out.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is like, those are moments that, the dice are this wonderful, chaotic, little ingredient that adds so much to the storytelling and creates this tension. Something like a death save is so potent because it's this 50-50 all right,
Yep.
what are you going to do? Let's see it play out. And the tension builds every round as you're rolling that thing, right? And the DM's got the power to basically go, it wasn't me, like the power was in your hands, or whatever you want to call it. And that's why we play, man. We play for those big moments, those exciting bits. And one of the things that I think that the lexicon of D&D has is the potency of a natural 1 or a natural 20, or the big roll. You know what I mean? Some of these other dice systems that I've played with, I love a lot of different systems. I play tons of different games, but some of them can get so math finicky because they want to have a fidelity of chances that you roll something and you can literally go, I don't know if this is good. In the moment, you need to know. You need to have that excitement at the table that everyone goes, whoa, and they freak out, right? Yeah. And some of these games where you're rolling and check a chart and double check a thing, and you're like, oh, you did a great job. Like that, I need that moment.
Yeah,
and
there's a few systems that are a little bit like you're throwing bones and you're just...
Yeah. You're like, I think I did well. And I don't want to diss any particular game, but like, I've literally rolled and been like, is that good? And you start looking around the table for someone to confirm with you. And then someone goes, that's the best roll you could have made. And you're like, oh, cool. I'm excited, know, but there's no doubt when you hit a D20 and you roll a 19 or a 20 and you're like, yeah, I crushed it. Like, this is going to be awesome. And so there's something really, I think, almost primal about that when you're at the table. There's something very enjoyable about that, for sure.
Now, I mean, obviously you're a famous comic book writer. What wall do you have going on that you can talk about right now?
Right. That's the difficult part. A lot of projects that are out now are stuff that, I finished months ago. So I wrapped up my run on Conan the Barbarian. And when I say that, I can't help but get a big smile on my face because holy crap. I wrote like 16 issues of Conan the Barbarian and Savage Sword of Conan. Like, what? How did this happen? And that was an amazing, amazing run. I had so much fun doing it. We had an amazing crew on that. And the last issue that I wrote was issue 300. I got to finally do one of these big anniversary issues that I've always seen since I was a kid. And now I've got my name on one of them with one of my favorite characters and this hugely important character in sword and sorcery literature. Like it's pretty amazing.
Real quick, apparently we're opening up a raffle for Trials of Mount Tiamat shirt. The raffle will be open for 2 minutes and we'll have 2 winners. So just announcing that. And anyone who's just joined, thank you so much for checking out this interview right now with Mr. Jim Zub.
Thanks. And then on the D&D front, I've got Mindbreaker that's coming out now. And so that's our 6th mini-series in kind of the heroes of Baldur's Gate. So that's Minsc and Boo, but it's also Delina and Krydal and Neris, these characters that, we've built up over these 5 previous mini-series. This 6th one is like bringing everything to a head, and it acts as a bit of a soft prequel to the Baldur's Gate 3 video game. So there's a lot of really cool stuff we're doing in that series. Eduardo Mello, our interior artist, is doing an amazing job. Max Dunbar's back as always doing covers. The book looks just stellar. And if you've been reading along this whole way, you're going to see all kinds of cool callbacks and plot lines paying off from previous miniseries. We've been weaving this one for a long time. So I'm super pumped for people to see how it all comes to a head.
Yeah, Max Dunbar kills it. He's a friend.
Guy's a beast.
His art. I'm haunted to this day by the rats playing with dice. The were-rats.
No, that guy is so good. And it's funny because, I kind of broke him in with Legends of Baldur's Gate in 2014. He was one of the artists that I showed to IDW and said, I think this guy would do a good job. And then Wizards agreed, and we ended up going forward with him as the artist. And then he came back to do the interior art on the 5th miniseries, Infernal Tides, which was a loose adaptation of Descend into Avernus, which I worked on as a consultant, and he worked on in terms of concept art. So it was like a real reunion for us, to be able to work on that miniseries together and to see how much his skills had grown, man. That was just such a rush. We want to do more stuff in the future, and we stay in touch all the time. We're always chatting online and kind of kibitzing. My only kind of regret is he's doing a lot of work over at DC right now. He's working on this little book called Batman. You may have heard of it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds made up.
I know. And so I'm sort of like, nah, when you're done with that junk, we should do some more stuff together. Yeah, but yeah, he's just killing it. He's such an amazing artist, such a great collaborator. I feel so fortunate, honestly. All the people I've gotten the chance to work with, whether it's here in the gaming space, you guys and Idol Champions, and all the people that were on the stream were just a hoot, to hang out with, or the comic book stuff I've been able to do, the different companies and the editors. A lot of the people I think also behind the scenes that you don't realize are busting their butts. Like, as much as you saw the 16 people that were on that Idol Champion stream facing front, there were a horde of people behind the scenes doing technical stuff and putting together the graphics and, organizing and trying to herd the cats of us.
A lot of cats. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Right. And you don't realize how much is involved in something like that. Like, I did one of the panels at D&D Celebration, and it seems so straightforward. Oh, you're just doing an online panel. And then all of a sudden there's this horde of engineers and technicians and graphics people all trying to get that stuff into place to make it look good in front of the curtain. You know what I mean? And that's the stuff that I have a much greater appreciation for now, because you see them all busting their butts so much,
Yeah, 100%. What's exciting you? Do you have time for pop culture? I mean,
it's a pretty intense schedule. Like, you were talking about stuff so right now I've got like 3 different Marvel projects that have not been announced. I've got another D&D project that hasn't been announced. And I can't even say what the last one is. So it's like 5 different things that I got going on. And that's like my pre-pandemic writing schedule. So I kind of got to get back into it. Like,
yeah,
I can't mess around. So yeah, I'm not watching as much stuff as I used to. Like, I'm watching Hawkeye, and we're like 2 or 3 episodes into Arcane, which is that animated show over on Netflix, which is really cool. Yeah, but that's about it. I don't have a lot of time to dig in deep on stuff, and I don't rewatch anything. When people tell me, they're like, "Oh yeah, I went through and rewatched a whole series of stuff," or "Yeah, rewatching Friends or something." I'm just like, "Are you kidding?" My brother watches tons of anime, and he's like, "Oh, you got to watch this series. It gets really good around episode 30." I'm like, I don't have time to watch all that. What are you, nuts? There's just no way. I gotta get this stuff.
I gotta make the time. I don't know. I think I run things in the background and I absorb them because I've been rewatching Farscape, which is a gem. Rewatching Firefly, which didn't take long.
Sure.
But yeah, I've been kind of like revisiting stuff like that. I
would love to. I just don't have time. It's like, just trying to keep up with the general conversation where people are like, "Oh, have you seen Eternals?" I'm like, I will. I mean, I will. I just, like, we saw Shang-Chi in the theater, and that was a nice,
Shang-Chi was amazing. Yeah.
So good, right? And plus you're like, assuming you lose a Toronto boy, like, like, okay, gotta get out there and support, So really, really happy. Obviously, the Marvel stuff's just amazing to see. Characters that I think of as like deep cut obscure characters are now A-list movie characters. Like, my mother knows who Rocket Raccoon and Groot are. Like, what?
Yeah, my mom shouldn't know who Venom is. Like,
no, this makes no sense. Like, how did we get to this wonderment, this golden age? When I was a kid, we had never had a Spider-Man live action movie, and I just wanted one. I wanted one really good, because like, I remember going to the theater in 1989 and seeing Batman, like Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, and you were like, whoa, like
mind blown. Yeah.
And it became the biggest movie of the year, and you saw the Batman logo everywhere.
Like every kid in my school had the same shirt. It was almost like it was school bonkers, outfit. Right? Yeah.
And the comic book stores were like under siege. Like, it was cool. And I was like, I want that to happen to Spider-Man. Like, I just want that. And then to see where we are now, and you're just like, this multi-layered, expansive, cross-pollinated universe of stories and ideas now coming to televisions and in movie theaters in the way that I think of, the comics, right? And now we see gaming is bigger than ever, and the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons and is just becoming more and more common kind of parlance. Like, we all know this stuff, and we know more and more people. And what I hear more often than anything else when I talk to people about D&D is either they play and I didn't even know it, or I've always wanted to. And I kind of look at them askew like, did you? I mean, this is great. I'm so I mean, cool. Let's start. Like, let's get going. Because clearly I want this to happen. I want as many people to dig into this stuff
Yeah, I
and
mean,
love
you
it the
are at
way
that
I
point
do.
of entry, right? Where people are reading your comics and they're getting interested
Right.
in D&D, and maybe they hadn't played D&D, like for the same way that the video games functioned.
Right.
Have you found yourself, telling people like, how do you get into it? And often I just tell
Right.
people, you just got to do it. I know it sounds
Right.
scary.
Right.
It's kind of like theater. Like until you get on stage, you don't really know.
Yeah. The nice thing is that what's changed everything really is the streams, right? Because
Yeah.
when we were growing up, learning D&D or any role-playing game meant going to someone's place or going to the university campus or whatever, and someone's going to sit you down with the archaic book and the dice and go, write this, do this, right? And if that was a good experience, you could become a lifelong fan. If it was a bad experience, you think it's not for you, right? And that is that bottleneck, that one group's methodology. If they were really, really strategic and you just are a theater kid, you might go, this sucks. Like, this isn't for me. Or, you're just playing with someone and they're not concentrating or doing a good job bringing you into the mix or explaining what's happening. And you just feel like they're speaking a foreign language and like, I don't want to do this stuff. I roll the dice and I guess I kind of know what's going on. I don't want to move my miniatures on this grid, or I don't really care about what's happening. But the difference with the stream games is, first of all, you can learn at your own pace. You watch other people clearly having a good time. They are, just naturally the rules come up, but you see that it's narrative first, which is most important, I think, to a lot of people, so that they're not intimidated by the density of the rules and the selections that they have. And then you see the fact that it's really chill. It's really fun. It's really engaging, and they're all getting into it, and they all get their big moments to kind of be fun and be silly and be engaged and heroic and bold, right? Like in our day-to-day lives, we don't get asked, what do you want to do? Like outside of a fast food menu very much, right? Like we don't, what do you want? Oh, I want the cheeseburger. But like at the office or whatever you do, no one's like, hey, do this amazing and important thing and be dramatic and awesome. And you're like, someone just hands you that baton every single time when you play, right? Where they go, what do you want? What do you think is cool? What do you think is funny? And if you have a witty moment, everyone at the table is entertained. Everyone on the stream is loving it. That is a very cool thing. That is a very empowering thing that a lot of people don't get to do. And the fact that you could do it anytime and do it with your friends, like instead of passively watching a movie together or being at a sporting event or whatever, you can make those stories. You can generate those memories together and learn things about your friends that you never knew before. I mean, why doesn't everybody do this? I don't understand, right?
What do you gravitate towards as a player? Because I find myself increasingly gravitating to just being a big dude who eats people
as well, a break. It seems to be right? The extremes, right? Like yeah. I'm normally the dungeon master. It's interesting because how people now know me is probably playing Minsc. I've played a couple other characters on charity streams and stuff like that, but most of them are still a little bit silly or kind of bumbling or naive or whatever. But I actually love playing. I love playing like fast talking characters. I love characters who can talk their way out of danger. Yeah. I love rogues. And that's a throwback to first edition where rogues were the only ones that seemed to have skills, right? Because you had pickpockets and open locks and find and remove traps and all that.
Yeah.
And none of the other characters had those finicky, funky little mechanical skills. Now everyone's got skills, but back then you didn't. And so it was like, I can climb walls. How do you like that? And you do all these funky things that felt like they instantly generated a feeling of personality, that everything was a caper and we were going to do something really engaging tonight, And so I've got kind of a soft spot for rogues, and that's why I always tend to fall back on those and characters that bite off more than they can chew and then have to get themselves squirm their way out of trouble. I love that stuff. Like everyone is part Han Solo, and part like, I'm trying to think of a good example of something from media, just fools with big ambitions. I love those kinds of characters, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that really grabs me. And yet as a dungeon master, I feel like I tend to broaden obviously a lot more. I like the big whatever the group is, I want to create contrast with them, right? If they're all playing lunkheads, then I'm going to, have someone really intellectual to put them up against. Or if they want to bulldoze through things, I will make them care about stuff so that we stop the murder hobo kind of loop or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. We had a couple of comments in chat, and I appreciate that. They were wondering what dice you were using when you managed to decapitate 2 dragons. Those were digital.
So it was all digital. That was the D&D Beyond dice. And like I said, the nice thing is I have the I posted screenshots of the record, let the record show. I was using the Dice Master set, I think it is, in D&D Beyond. Not that it matters, I'm sure, but for D&D Beyond, I think I've got this sounds corny to say, I've got a staff account or whatever, so it's got like all the things. So I just change my dice up all the time and whatever looks pretty and fun.
And then from the lurking writer, at this point, Jim is this isn't a question. At this point, Jim is Minsc to me.
Thanks. That's very kind.
Yeah.
That's very kind, honestly. Yeah. I try not to, I never want to take this stuff for granted. And even these stream games, I've only done a handful of them. And so they're all kind of extra special. So I always try and lean in and look for those moments. And I'm thankful that the dice and the narrative has lived up to that, that I've been able to. The dragon slaying thing was insane. Like when I think about it, it shouldn't have happened, but that's kind of the joy of this stuff. You never know. And that's kind of where that's what you want. You want to walk away from a game kind of walking on air and excited about the possibilities, right? I'm sure you feel the same way.
Oh, 100%. It's the chaos that I enjoy the most. And often I will do the less optimal thing because I think I've had all those moments where I got to do something big, but if I have the opportunity to say crap talk a god, I will 100% take that.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of players, at first, when you start playing these games, you want to win, right? You have this idea in your head of, I'm going to be super cool and everyone's going to remember my heroism or that I pulled one over or whatnot. And the longer you play, I enjoy putting myself into bad situations for that exact reason, because this will be memorable. This will be hilarious. This is just going to break the dungeon master's mind that I've made stuff more difficult for myself rather than easier. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I appreciate that as a dungeon master quite a bit, actually. The non-optimal thing.
Right. And it's same thing with character creation, where it used to be, I know when I was a kid, you would never want a low stat because you felt like it reflected badly on you.
Right.
Like you were, I don't want to be weak. And you're like, now if I get a low stat, I'm like, hilarious. Now I know what I can frame the entire character around. Like they're, that one just not even dump stat. It's like kind of the character stat. Like it's what makes them tick.
Yeah. I see that as an advantage. If you look at Han Solo, most people I think would think, okay, he's a rogue, he's charismatic.
Right.
He's not.
No.
Every time he tries to deceive someone, every time he tries to persuade them.
One of the greatest moments in film is him on that speaker where he's trying to convince them and then he just shoots the thing.
Yeah.
That is a D&D session writ large, man. That is the caper gone wrong. Those are the moments you want in your game. You don't want, as much fun as it is to plan out a heist or plan out, okay, here's what we're going to do. If it all just goes exactly the way you plan, okay, you cast the silent spell and I'll sneak in and pick the lock and check for trap, and you pulled it all off. On the one hand, you can feel good about your own strategic superiority, but what a snoozer. What a boring session to just have it all play out the way you expect, right?
Yeah.
You need that spicy, oh my God, we never knew there's an invisible stalker in the room or whatever, any of those, bits oh, there's a trap. There's an extra wrinkle. Someone in our group betrayed us and paid off whoever. Great. Let's the chips fall where they may. Let the dice roll. Let's go, And when I'm writing the comics for D&D, the best compliment I get is that people ask me if I've played sessions for these comic stories. And obviously I haven't, but I've played hundreds and hundreds of games. And so what I try and inject into the comic is that feeling of things gone wrong or things spontaneously changing on a moment, because that's what a good dice roll does, right? That amazing bit of action or that incredible, use of a spell, and all of a sudden, here we go, like everything's gone off the rails and we're all holding on for dear life, right? And so if I can put those moments into the D&D comic, that feels like the energy I want at the table. And so it all it feels true to the game, even if I'm narratively building those moments, Yeah.
100%. Yeah. We need to play more.
Clearly, right?
Yeah.
And I want to DM more. That's the one thing I haven't done on a stream yet, is I haven't DM'd. And I don't know if it will be, it's different. Playing on a stream is different from playing in person.
Yeah, you get a little higher energy, a little less relaxed, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing I notice about streams is that, you're less kind of adhering to, okay, I got to look this rule up and we're going to get a technical on this, because no one wants to sit there on a stream and go, one moment, please, while I consult the monster manual.
Yeah.
For the effect, whatever. And it's not to say that stuff doesn't matter, because it does. And being organized is super important. But there's also a sense of forward momentum is even more important at the end of this thing. Make a call, let's go. Like, let's rip this thing forward and make it fun. And that's a quality that I think has inadvertently improved some of my tabletop, because in tabletop you can get with your friends, you're all sitting there, no one's punching the clock on this thing, you're not on camera or whatever. You can kind of get bogged down in some of the minutia a little bit, and you're like, is this why we came here? Is this why we're all sitting around? Right. So that you and I can argue about whether or not you're 55 feet or 60 feet from the person? Like, come on. Like, not to say that it's always the rule of cool, because I think it's a good thing to put the pressure on people and to hold their feet to the fire. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean you let everyone get away with everything. But at a certain point, you also go, okay, for the sake of narrative and expediency, this seems to work. Does anyone got a problem with that? Nope. All right, let's go. And tear into it. And I would be curious to see how maybe it would, you never know till you do it, right? But I would love to sort of take my DMing skills of multiple decades now and see how that rolls out on screen, and see if it breaks me or not.
It's scary. I mean, I remember I got asked to do it, and I was terrified. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm going to do this thing. I had live streamed on my own channel, but not to 5,000 people, and I was like,
right. Well, and I think that inadvertently, like, I wouldn't want to. I don't know if I would even want to check the chat. Nothing against anyone who's in the chat.
No.
But if you're doing it live, like, I don't want to kind of lose my own way because you're trying to please 5,000 different people. You know, like, you've got to read. A good dungeon master. We talked about this before when you interviewed me about the Idle Champion stream. A good dungeon master listens. They have to listen to their players and they have to respond to what they're doing, right? And so, if I feel like we're all having a good time and this is working and you're invested, then I'm doing my job and we got to keep this thing going, rather than being like, whatever, the great sages or Jeremy Crawford's going to wag his finger because I got a rule wrong. Not that Jeremy would do that. That's the funny thing is. Yeah. But he'll tell you what the technical rules will say, and he'll explain how the design process went to build it, so that if you want to do it by the book, you could. And yet I know, and I've seen that Jeremy will run just as freeform a moment as anyone else, which tells you what's really important at the end of it. I
mean, it is just a skeletal structure for the imagination.
Yeah, ultimately. Yeah. And I think it's about, the rules are a structure, exactly what you said there, and your ability to leverage them well, so that when a player says, hey, according to the rules, I can do this. And it's like, yeah, I'll let you do that because that's fun and funky and crazy. And let's roll because this will be cool. And other times it's sort of like, does that work with what we're all doing here? Is this just going to slow down the entire process?
100%. I've seen them in groups and parties. Sometimes, like, they're at cross purposes, and you got to kind of realign. I'm like, okay, well, if we go down this route, that's a whole episode. Yeah.
And the other thing too is your ability as a dungeon master to step away from in the moment and kind of go, okay, can we talk kind of out of game, for lack of a better term, and make sure that everyone's still on board? Because you'll get those classic moments where someone will get hunkered down. This is what my character would do, or any of those kinds of things.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're like, I know you think this is a good idea, but I think it's unraveling why we're playing and what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. Why are you doing this? Is it because something as simple as you don't feel like you've been able to flex at the table, or you feel like you've got to pay off this plot line or this aspect of the character's personality?
Yeah.
I'm cool with all that, but this may not be the way to do it. And I think as a kid, I would never do that, because the rules were like the way we socialized. And so if someone could break the rules, it was like, well, there's nothing I can do. If the book says you can do it, you can do it. Right. And now as an adult, I'm much more likely to be like, hey, what's going on? Like, how are we gonna fix this thing, and make it cool for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain, I wouldn't quite call it method acting, but sometimes you can get wrapped up in like, this character would never do this thing, and would absolutely do this thing. I've had the benefit of like occasionally been surprised about what the morality of a character I've played since I was 8 was.
Totally.
And then that's been fun. But like,
right.
Yeah, like, hey, I want to do this thing. I'm like, I'm pretty much along for the ride.
Sure, but there's also, I think you have a sense that if the table was, for lack of a word, turning against you, like if it was clearly unraveling every last element of entertainment, you would be like, all right, we got to figure something out. Like it's not just about, the Jim show or the Todd show or the whatever. It's about us collectively coming together to make a thing. And that doesn't mean I always get my way. And that doesn't mean I'm even going to win. Like dying vaingloriously is a cool story,
Yeah.
Or every so often, and there is something thoroughly entertaining about characters dying innocuously. Like just a bad trap, man. It was just a bad trap. Yeah. You're like, because these worlds are dangerous, and surviving is its own kind of reward. And so sometimes that poison dart from the chest just takes you out.
Yeah.
And you might go, damn it, like, oh, I had better plans for this character. But there's something fun and funny about the legacy of an adventuring group where there is a series of gravestones behind them. And they go, yeah, we've lost like 7 people so far, but we're still going, and sometimes your character is fertilizer. Like
you need to get out of my head, Jim.
That's the narrative.
I'm working on a show now where I'm like, I think the lethality on this is going to be pretty high.
I think but I think, again, if you set the tone and you tell the players, man, you can get iced in this one. Yeah, that's fun. Like when you play Call of Cthulhu and you're like, we're not going to win. Everyone's going to go crazy. And we're going to have a great time tonight. And you're like, all right, let's do it. Like, and so then when people lean into it and they know, that is one of the joyous things about a mini series as well, where when I was living out in Halifax, I was talking to friends of mine who had played some D&D, but not a lot. And I, amped up the Tomb of Horrors. It's the most brutal module of all time. It's a meat grinder. It's brutal. And they were like, out of nowhere, one of them called me on it, and they go, I don't believe you. I'm like, what? They're like, run it for us. I was like, all right. So they sat down and they generated characters. And I literally said to them, we're going to do it like a video game. Like you each have 3 lives because you're going to die so much. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And then spoilers, one of the first things you can do in Tomb of Horrors is there's 3 different entry points.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are generally lethal.
Yep.
And so they go down the wrong tunnel, the whole party dies. I'm like, everyone loses a life. And they're just like, what? Welcome, my friends, to the Tomb of Horrors, right? Yeah. But you've got to understand the Gygaxian, style module was not meant to be an ongoing narrative.
Yeah.
It was almost like a test of wills in a tournament mode, between players in a dungeon.
I mean, almost in this, almost in that way that a video game is like expecting you to die over and over and over again.
People play Dark Souls and they really enjoy that game. Have you played it?
Yeah, I have. I don't.
Oh man,
because I lived that era. I've already got blood money by Psygnosis. Oh my god, that game.
So my buddy, Ray Fox, he's also a comic book writer. We've known each other since university, and he contacted me. He's like, you got to play this game. And I was like, okay. And he goes, you're not going to like it until you do. And I'm like, what? So I start playing. I tried Dark Souls, couldn't get into it. And then years later, Bloodborne came out, and
evocative.
Right. Gothy, awesome, violent, whatever. And I get Bloodborne on like one of those PlayStation game sales, and I start playing the game, and I'm like, why would anyone play this? Like, I haven't left the first area and I played for like 4 hours, but it's so evocative and atmospheric and engaging, and you just stick with it, and you throw yourself up against the wall, and you throw yourself up against the wall, and then finally with your face you will break through the brick wall, and the skill tree kind of changes. You want to suddenly understand what you need to do and what you've been doing wrong, and then you can't get enough of it. You're like, I love this. Like, the adrenaline rush of breaking through those barriers and figuring out how it works and starting to kick butt is so amazing that now I go back to other video games and I'm like, why are they being so kind to me? Like, why is this game giving me everything? Like, make it harder, because I want to be able to prove myself in this weird arena of whatever. And so yeah, now I'm like quite hooked on the games and eagerly looking forward to new ones, as they release them and whatnot. But it's sort of a similar thing. Like, there's some D&D players, and there's some games where I want to sit around with my friends and keep it light and keep it fluffy and silly and whatever. And other times it's like a battle of wills. Like, I want you to try and crush me, and I will figure my way out of this. And there's something enjoyable about that too. Absolutely.
We got a bunch of questions.
Sweet.
Oh boy, some of these are tough. So I'm gonna go to like I'm gonna throw out a couple. First off, someone is asking who is gonna win, Minsc or Conan in a fight.
Oh jeez. Okay. I mean, I don't generally do who wins in a fight, because as corny as it sounds, I kind of prescribe to the Stan Lee method, where he goes, who's writing the story, whose name is on the cover.
Comic is who?
Yeah,
like,
in Conan's comic, Conan wins, right? And in Baldur's Gate, Minsc wins, right? So that's kind of the corny answer that's sort of true, because you can tilt the field any way you want, narratively speaking. Like, Conan is the king by his own hand, and he's probably a stronger character, but the world that he lives in, the Hyborian Age, is so much more brutal. Like, I was literally writing Conan and Dungeons and Dragons simultaneously. Like, both books were going at the same time. And people say, oh, isn't that hard? And it's like, no, because you kind of change your mentality. Like, for me, writing comics is almost like role playing. Like, I'm getting into character. And when I'm writing a Conan book, I got to think in the way that the character would, and what the world is like, and the kind of soaring, pulpy narration that Robert E. Howard would use that I would never use on the page for Dungeons and Dragons. And so, Minsc and Boo and the Baldur's Gate party is colorful and magical in a way that a Conan book never would be. So I don't know that I would want them to cross over, weirdly enough. Like, there is something fun about the contrast of it. Putting Minsc and Boo in Ravenloft was amazing, because they don't fit, and kind of him pressing up against the darkness and the bleakness of Ravenloft kind of brought out some interesting qualities.
Yeah.
There's a moment in the comics where Minsc is getting his Taroka read by Madame Eva, and she's telling him he's going to lose. You will not beat Strahd. And he's like, you're wrong. And he freaks out because she's telling him the truth, but he doesn't want to see it. And so that became a real fun push and pull. But yeah, Conan would win, I guess, in a pure statistical kind of thing. But then, of course, if Minsc has got Lillicor, the Vorpal Greatsword, all bets are off, because Conan doesn't do magic, and he doesn't do magical swords. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm throwing out a question of my own, because we got a lot of questions, but we're not going to be able to get to all of them. I am throwing out a question. Out of the group, out of the 15 people who played, who of them do you think should have a comic book series?
Oh, come on.
You're going to lose friends.
What are you doing to me here? You're killing me.
Was there any of those characters that stood out that you're like, I don't know, that might be a cool adventure?
You know, it's funny because it's like you know, Penelope's kind of your classic like childlike wonderment sort of character, and the fact that she's so powerful but has been able to maintain this innocent kind of heart, I think was really fun. You know, and Hope does such a good job playing that character. It always would throw me because she would stay in that voice so long, and then she would like talk about her stats, and I was like, what is this other voice coming out of this human being? Because she's got that, even the camera, she had it tilted high so she seems smaller in the frame. Like, just great. I think that would be a lot of fun. But what's interesting is I don't know, like, could you get dozens of stories out of that, or is that just like a one off, right? Whereas a character like a Whittle or like a, you know, Shaka, where they're getting pulled down this path of corruption, maybe there's more there where you build it out and you show them starting in one place and ending up somewhere very different, right? So
yeah, especially like Shaka was like shocking. What happened to Shaka was shocking.
It was great though. That's what you want.
Yeah.
I love it if a player doesn't know what's coming next and is like, well, I'm strap in, like, let's see this all kind of happen, you know?
All right. Well, that's all our time, Jim Zub. Thank you so much for being on Idle Insights. I really appreciate it. We could probably talk for another 4 hours, but then
true.
Our tongues would fall
if there's
apart.
questions that you just typed into the chat and I didn't get to, come on over to my Twitter and feel free to ask me there. I'll be happy to answer them. I'm on Twitter at Jim Zub. If you go to jimzub.com, that's where you can see all the stuff that I'm working on, previews and interviews and all that different stuff. Along with, there's a whole section of my website that is tutorials. So how to write comics, how to write a pitch for a publisher, how to work in the industry, and just common pitfalls that I didn't know about starting out and things that I want to help people to navigate if they want to get into a creative career. So,
awesome. All right. Thank you so
Sweet.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Every time. Everyone have a good night. Bye.